will lead the new government, when it might convene, and what Mr Thaksin has planned for the future.
Packing up the tools of protest, hundreds of demonstrators spent weeks camped outside Government House. They'd promised to go if the Premier did likewise. Now their objective has been reached, or has it? Mr Thaksin was all smiles as he arrived for talks with his ministers. This will be my last cabinet meeting, he declared to the throng of reporters. He says he's ready for a holiday, with his deputy taking over his role until a new Prime Minister is named. Mr Thaksin doesn't want to create an uneasy feeling among the opposition parties, explained a spokesman. But they're already deeply suspicious. Protest leaders say they'll hold a new rally this week, demanding Mr Thaksin bow out of politics completely.
A lot of people fear that being an MP and also leader of the Thai Rak Thai, he will be in fact the power behind the scene.
It was after a meeting with the King that Mr Thaksin announced he was stepping down. The move was in the interests of national unity, he said, and out of respect for the monarch, who appears to have lost patience after 2 months of mounting protests. They began in February after Mr Thaksin's family sold $2.5 billion worth of telecom shares without paying tax. The Premier called a snap election to try to strengthen his mandate. Boycotted by the opposition, the poll delivered a huge protest vote instead. Mr Thaksin's manoeuvring has left the country bogged down in a constitutional quagmire. 39 districts have no elected representative, and successful by-elections will have to be held in each before Parliament can convene. It could be 15 months before fresh elections are held. It's then, say analysts, that Mr Thaksin will try to reclaim the leadership. Gary McNabb, World News Australia.
Well, joining us on the line now from Bangkok is the BBC's Kylie Morris. Kylie, good evening to you. After all these weeks of rolling protests, we're seeing pictures tonight of some of those people packing up. Does this mean it's all over?
I think that's probably too early to say. Certainly there is a sense that by the Prime Minister announcing that he will step aside, that it's brought some, I suppose, a sense of relief, really, to the many people who had wanted him to resign as Prime Minister. But certainly there's no really clear picture emerging as yet as to what the future, the political future of the country is, what the Parliament will look like, who in fact will lead the country while this process of political reform is developed.
Can you give us an idea of what the parliamentary options and the constitutional options are now?
Well, certainly we're just hearing from the opposition, the main opposition party leader, Apasit Wajajua, and he has told a press conference in Bangkok that the opposition, the main opposition parties, are content to sit on the margins, sit on the sidelines of the parliamentary process while political reforms are agreed upon. Now, if they choose to do that, that means effectively that we're probably going to see a parliament sitting in the next month or so where it's well and truly a ruling party parliament, where nearly 500 seats are controlled by Mr Thaksin's Thai Rak Thai party. But certainly the opposition say that they will participate and expect a very considered set of meetings on constitutional reform, and on the basis of that they'll participate in elections in the future.
Now, Mr Thaksin is a wily and successful politician. Is there a chance that if he does hand over power to his deputy, that might amount to Thaksin in disguise?
Well, certainly, I don't think anyone imagines that Police Lieutenant Chichai is any kind of an independent leader for the country. I mean, he's very much a trusted deputy of Mr Thaksin's, and that's why I think we've seen Mr Thaksin today say that he will, if you like, Chichai will simply look after the day-to-day business of the caretaker Prime Minister. He's not in a position constitutionally to become the leader of the country. But yes, of course, it's a real fear, I think, with Mr Thaksin. He exerts such massive influence over the country and indeed over the party and the finances of the party that it will be difficult to see Thai Rak Thai without his shadow looming over them.
Thanks, Kylie. That update from the BBC's Kylie Morris in Bangkok. Authorities are still searching for a family of 6 West Papuans that's believed to have landed on a remote Australian island in Torres Strait. There are reports that a union activist, accompanied by his wife and 4 children, fled West Papua because he was threatened by Indonesian authorities. Any new West Papuan arrivals threatens to worsen the continuing diplomatic rift between Indonesia and Australia. Today, the Prime Minister had a message for other West Papuans who may consider making the journey.
I regard them as citizens of the Republic of Indonesia. That's my message to them. And I have a very strong view that the best resolution of these issues is within the sovereignty of the Republic of Indonesia over West Papua.
The Indonesian President, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, made a flying visit to West Papua today. He's rejected claims that Indonesian troops have committed human rights abuses and warned foreigners against interfering in the province. The row has sparked angry scenes in Jakarta today, where hardline Muslims have demanded that Indonesia cut diplomatic ties with Australia. Branding Australia as terrorists, dozens of protesters rallied outside our embassy, turning up the heat on John Howard over the government's decision to grant asylum to 42 West Papuans. Others torched an Australian flag, while some vented their anger by throwing oranges and tomatoes at security guards. Dutch prosecutors say an investigation has shown that former Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic died in his cell at The Hague of natural causes. In a statement released tonight, they say there's not a single indication that the death was the result of foul play. Saddam Hussein was back in court again tonight as his trial resumed after a 3-week break. The chief prosecutor says he has new evidence linking Saddam and his 7 co-defendants to the deaths of more than 140 Shias in a town north of Baghdad in 1982. The defendants are challenging the veracity of the documents, saying their signatures on them are forged. But Saddam is facing another charge with much greater implications.
Saddam Hussein was back in the dock, having lost none of his zest for sparring with the judge. Prevaricating with long, rambling replies and refusing to comply with the judge's request to give a sample of his signature. Instead, he accused the country's Shia-led Interior Ministry of killing and torturing thousands of people. But now Saddam Hussein may have less to smile about. He faces the prospect of another trial, this time for genocide, the alleged slaughter of an estimated 180,000 Kurds. An Iraqi High Court spokesman said the investigation was complete and that the case was now being transferred to the criminal court. It involved Saddam's role in Operation Anfal, a 3-phase offensive against the Kurds, including the gas attack in Halabja on March the 16th, 1988, when 5,000 people were killed. This is viewed by some as one of the worst atrocities during Saddam's regime. Outside, another day of violence and political uncertainty. These people were rushed to hospital after a car bomb explosion in the capital's Sadr city. At least 10 people were killed in this poor, mostly Shia neighborhood. And the country's politicians still can't agree on a unity government, nearly 4 months after the elections. Prime Minister Ibrahim Al-Jafari is resisting growing pressure to resign from minority Sunni and Kurd leaders, some Shia leaders, and the United States.
The message is that the people of Iraq have voted, and now it's time for the elected leaders to stand up and do their job.
As for the ousted leader, this session is again expected to be a short one, as experts analyze handwriting in documents challenged by the defendants. Amrita Chima, World News Australia.
Here there's been a mixed response to the federal government's new $1.8 billion package aimed at rehabilitating the ailing mental health sector. While welcomed by many, some say that unless the state and territory governments match the commitment, nothing will change.
Ingrid Ozols has suffered from mental illness on and off during the last 20 years. She was also a carer for her mother, who was diagnosed with bipolar.
It's fantastic. That's a really welcoming start. People who have been vulnerable for so long, who have been stigmatised by mental health conditions, can feel that suddenly this is something that A, they can talk about, B, that they can actually go and find some help.
The package includes new teams of GPs, psychologists, psychiatrists and mental health nurses. It'll boost the number of mental health workers and provide more respite places for families looking after a mentally ill loved one.
It's something that we can afford to do, it's something we need to do, and it's something that we have a responsibility to do.
But the opposition claims it doesn't go far enough, with no money allocated for acute mental health beds or community care.
So much more needs to be done, but at least today, finally, John Howard and his government have taken some responsibility for the crisis they've created over 10 long years.
As part of the package, an extra 900 personal carers will help the mentally ill live in the community, and there'll be more accommodation places available for mentally ill people who are also fighting a drug or alcohol addiction.
It does signify that mental health, for the first time in Australia, is being given a higher priority than it's ever been had before, and it's a good start.
But the Prime Minister made it clear a joint federal-state effort is the only way forward to tackle the issue. Several states and territories have already indicated they too will be increasing their mental health budgets. Carolee Tilvern, World News Australia.
A quick look at our top stories now. Thailand faces weeks of political uncertainty after the Prime Minister's sudden resignation. Prosecutors in Iraq are moving to charge Saddam Hussein with genocide. And later in the programme,
They hang back from some school excursions. They hesitate to fill the petrol tank.
stark choices for Australia's working poor. The Australian government is warning travellers to France to exercise caution while violent street protests continue. Overnight, riot police have again fought running battles with students on the streets of Paris in demonstrations against new youth employment laws.
The protests started 2 months ago and show no sign of easing. The longer they continue, the greater the crisis for President Jacques Chirac and the ruling party UMP. In Paris's Place d'Italie, a standoff between protesters and riot police broke into skirmishes. Soon police and demonstrators fought running battles. Police said they took over 300 people into custody in Paris. Trade unionists and student leaders said up to 3 million people took to the streets across the country in nearly 200 rallies, most of which were peaceful. Authorities put the figure at 1 million. But it was still as big as any of the protests held so far against new youth employment laws, which will make it easier for employers to sack young workers. And outrage continues despite President Jacques Chirac's move last Friday to suspend the contentious law, pending a new one amending the most hotly contested provisions. Unions want the government to drop the legislation altogether, and that's what they'll push for in talks scheduled tonight. Interior Minister and presidential hopeful Nicolas Sarkozy met police who'd earlier been involved in the clashes. He's the only possible winner so far, taking a leading role in bringing the unions to the negotiating table, as his rival Dominique de Villepin is portrayed as the villain. The day of protest in Paris ended on a festive, even carnival tone, but more mass demonstrations are planned. Jenny Lavelle, World News Australia.
A former Sinn Féin official recently exposed as a British spy has been found shot dead at his home in Ireland after apparently being tortured. Dennis Donaldson admitted in December that he'd been a double agent for 2 decades. The murder has sent shockwaves through the parties involved in Northern Ireland's peace process.
Donaldson found at his remote cottage in County Donegal 2 weeks ago by a Dublin-based newspaper, The Sunday World. The cottage has no electricity and no running water. He said he just wanted to live the rest of his life in peace. It wasn't to be. When his body was found, the Irish Justice Minister said he'd been shot in the head and the body mutilated, his arm either almost cut off or shot off. The Irish police are saying little about their investigation, which is clearly at an early stage, or about who might be responsible. The IRA's denied involvement, but there seems little doubt Republicans of some kind did it. Dennis Donaldson, in the pale suit, had charges of running a Sinn Féin spy ring at Stormont dropped late last year. Then he was backed by the Sinn Féin leadership as the victim of a politically motivated prosecution. Within days, he was admitting he'd been a double agent for decades.
I was recruited in the 1980s after compromising myself during a vulnerable time in my life. Since then, I have worked for British intelligence and the RUC PSNI Special Branch.
To Irish Republicans, the ultimate treachery, to be a British informer. The so-called Stormont-Gate affair culminated in a police raid on Sinn Féin's offices at Parliament buildings, with allegations that Republicans had been intelligence gathering, including the addresses of prison officers, many of whom moved home as a result. The Sinn Féin president condemned what he called a very brutal murder, but said it should make politicians work harder for peace. Irish Republicans have long memories. Put in the most callous terms, Dennis Donaldson's past has caught up with him.
There's been a cautious response in Australia to the latest proposal for an Asian economic trading bloc. The latest proposal comes from Japan, which estimates that the pact could be worth around $330 billion to the 16 member states. They'd include the 10 ASEAN members, plus Japan, Australia, China, South Korea, India and New Zealand.
The hand of friendship and regional influence stretches from North Asia into the South Pacific. Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao is in Fiji for talks which Beijing hopes will cement its influence in the area. China has been setting the pace in pursuing bilateral free trade deals through the region and has previously pushed its vision of a giant Asian economic community. That, say some observers, explains Japan's similar proposal today, involving all 16 countries comprising the East Asian Summit launched last December. With Global World Trade Organization talks noted more for their street protests than their progress, this latest regional plan could augment a bilateral FTA that Australia is now exploring with Japan. Local business groups say it's worth a look, but as with the bilateral negotiations, faces the stumbling block of heavily protected farm industries, especially in Japan.
For Australia to sign on to something like this, we'd want it to be comprehensive. That means it would need to include agriculture.
For other observers, the main problem would be political. Some saying that so many deals have been bilateral because agreement between more than two countries has proved impossible. Yet according to one economist, geopolitics are behind Japan's plan.
They're having a difficult time with China at present, and they want to ensure that they don't have inferior market access to China, so they'd prefer to negotiate a larger agreement including all these countries.
The Office of Trade Minister Mark Vaile says it's received no details of the proposal, but looks forward to getting the chance to examine it. Raina Sarampayat, World News Australia.
New research has found that more working Australians are facing a lifetime of poverty. They're said to be struggling with ill health, anxiety and material hardship.
The study found that childcare workers and cleaners are among the poorest in Australia, their wages hitting lows of $500 a week. And the report's author says an increasing number of Australians are likely to remain poor for the rest of their lives, no matter how hard they work.
Low-paid workers hesitate to send their kids to the dentist in case the dentist finds a filling that will cost money to fix. They hang back from some school excursions. They hesitate to fill the petrol tank.
Ms Pocock says such workers do not qualify for government assistance, yet they can't provide a decent standard of living. And she says they'll face ill health and anxiety as they struggle to look after their families. Ms Pocock says conditions are likely to get worse for the working poor under the government's new workplace relations laws. Both the government and unions were claiming victory today for the reinstatement of 29 New South Wales abattoir workers sacked under the laws.
I think what this incident demonstrates is that the allegations made by the Labor Party and the unions that we had taken away all protection for Australian workers were absolute nonsense.
The ACTU has called for the laws to be clarified to avoid a repeat of the Cara dispute.
Unfortunately, I think we will see this situation re-emerge at other workplaces. Maybe it'll take a while. I hope that it doesn't happen.
The opposition says the backdown came only because of bad publicity.
They acted basically because they're embarrassed and because they didn't want a bad introduction for their legislation.
Gary Bryant, who has been involved in negotiations, says it's not over yet.
The company have indicated they still want to have a combined shift. We are talking at the present time.
He says they're still working on an agreement to suit both parties. Cassandra Hill, World News Australia.
To the finance figures now. The Australian share market has hit new highs with banks leading the charge. Lenders benefited as the Reserve Bank left official interest rates on hold for a 13th straight month. And the country's biggest steelmaker, Smorgon, jumped following a profit upgrade. On the Asian market, Tokyo's Nikkei fell on a second day of profit-taking. Markets in Europe are weaker in early morning deals, while overnight Wall Street rose as comments by Federal Reserve officials were taken as signalling an imminent halt to US rate hikes. The Australian dollar is currently back above 72 US cents. And while our rates were unchanged today, a spate of firm economic data is seen as strengthening the case for an increase in coming months. On the commodity markets, both gold and oil are weaker. Well, news is coming in tonight of the death of singer-songwriter Gene Pitney. His agent says the 65-year-old American music legend was found dead in his hotel in the Welsh city of Cardiff during a tour of the UK. Pitney's 40-year career included a string of #1 hits, among them 24 Hours from Tulsa and Only Love Can Break a Heart. And finally tonight, most people with a weight problem go on diet. But Steve Vaught is not most people. He was so unhappy about weighing 176 kilos, or 28 stone if you prefer, that he decided to walk it off during an epic journey from California to New York. After a year on the road, Vaught says he's had plenty of time to focus attention on America's obsession with eating.
He calls himself Fat Man Walking. After 1 year, he has trekked 2,400 miles, lost about 6 stone, and found himself.
I left San Diego thinking that if I walked across the country, I'd lose 100 pounds and I'd be happy, or 150 pounds and I'd be happy. Along the way, I realized that I had to be happy before I was going to do anything else.
But first things first, we join him for a breakfast at the Bob Evans Diner, steak and eggs. Steve wouldn't say no to a muesli, but this isn't muesli country.
You know, sometimes you look at these menus and it's almost hopeless. You know, it's just fried this and battered that and gravied this. It's just terrible.
They're not selling you anything that you're not buying.
Breakfast over, the road beckons. A year ago, Steve was a car mechanic with 2 children and a wife. Now Fat Man Walking has become Thinner Man philosophizing.
So you've got 2 things here, churches and fast food outlets. Really.
Churches and fast food. Both of them doing the same thing.
Which is what?
Comforting a pain and deluding you into believing that you are in good shape. You lose sight of the fact that you are the cure. You think...
Really, the flow is interrupted by a call from one of Oprah's producers. America loves journeys, and Steve has now got a book deal, a film project, and marketing offers from diet pill companies, but not yet universal fame.
I'm the guy that's walking across the country. Oh, have you heard about me?
No.
Hey, this guy comes from England. He's heard about me. Very funny.
5 weeks and a few more stone to go, but then now it's more about wisdom gained than weight lost.
I think that most Americans want this to be a simple thing. You leave San Diego, sort of Rodney Dangerfield, you wind up in New York, you're George Clooney, everything's perfect. It's like, that's not the real world.
Take care.
To the weather now. A trough may force those storms to the Queensland coast and tropics. Cold and gusty with hail and highland snow across the southeast and dry in the west. In the major centres, windy and wet in Canberra and Melbourne, while Sydney remains dry. Heavy showers for Darwin, clearing in Brisbane. Looking further afield, sunny and mild in Wellington, stormy in Nadi and Honiara. In Southeast Asia, sunny for Hong Kong and Phnom Penh, stormy for Singapore as rain intensifies in Banda Aceh. Further north, grey skies for Beijing, Seoul and Tokyo, late rain in Taipei, fine in Islamabad as Delhi swelters. Heading west, more rain expected for Warsaw and Budapest, but Prague should be dry, fine too in Barcelona and overcast in London. The outlook now for Africa, Lagos and Addis Ababa may clear as Durban and Johannesburg enjoy a warm day. Across the Atlantic to South America, rain forecast for Bogota, while La Paz remains cloudy, stormy in Asunción. And for North America, finally, the chance of a storm in Chicago and warmer weather ahead in Mexico City. And that's the World News tonight. I'll be back with you at the same time tomorrow. We leave you with some of the flooding that's inundated much of Central Europe. Good night.